I'm getting that yellow jaundice been going around, I know it. The heebie-jeebies.
It's hepatitis and you don't have it.
Field Marshal Erwin Rommel remains one of the most complex and enigmatic figures of World War II. Celebrated for his tactical brilliance in the North African campaign and admired by enemies and allies alike, Rommel earned the moniker, the Desert Fox. His battlefield conduct, sense of military honor, and eventual opposition to Adolf Hitler helped cultivate a reputation that stood apart from many of his contemporaries in the German High Command. But the question remains, had Rommel survived the war, would he have been charged with war crimes during the post-war tribunals such as the Nuremberg trials? This essay explores this question by examining Rommel's military career, his personal and professional relationship with the Nazi regime, his behavior toward prisoners and civilians, and his potential complicity in war crimes through command responsibility. It will also address how his death, forced suicide in 1944 due to suspected involvement in the July 20th plot, shaped his legacy and may have precluded serious scrutiny. In analyzing the available evidence, we can reach a reasoned conclusion about whether Rommel would have been charged with war crimes had he lived to see Germany's defeat. Erwin Rommel was a career soldier who rose through the ranks of the German army during World War I and the interwar period. By the start of World War II, he had gained the attention of Adolf Hitler due to his leadership skills and devotion to military professionalism. Rommel's participation in the invasion of France in 1940, where he led the 7th Panzer Division with speed and efficiency, cemented his reputation as a bold and innovative commander. In 1941, Hitler appointed Rommel to command the Afrika Korps in North Africa, where he would achieve his greatest fame. He was respected not only by his own men but also by Allied commanders who admired his tactical ingenuity and respect for the rules of warfare. Winston Churchill notably referred to Rommel as a great general in a speech before the British House of Commons. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Rommel was not part of the Prussian military aristocracy, nor was he a member of the Nazi Party. He was, however, a loyal servant of the German state and accepted Hitler's patronage. This relationship would later complicate assessments of his role within the Nazi war machine. Rommel's association with Hitler began to grow during the early years of the Third Reich. Hitler viewed Rommel as a model soldier, disciplined, bold, and politically pliable. Rommel, in turn, appreciated the opportunities afforded by Hitler's patronage, including rapid promotions and prestigious assignments. Yet Rommel was not a committed Nazi ideologue. He did not embrace the racial doctrines of the regime, nor did he participate in the political infighting that defined much of the Nazi leadership. Still, his close proximity to Hitler raised questions about whether he endorsed the criminal policies of the Nazi state, particularly as a member of the Wehrmacht's upper echelon. In North Africa and later in France, Rommel operated as a field commander with considerable autonomy. Unlike figures such as Heinrich Himmler or Reinhard Heydrich, Rommel was not directly involved in implementing the final solution or other genocidal policies. However, this does not automatically absolve him of potential culpability, especially under the doctrine of command responsibility. A cornerstone of the Nuremberg trials and subsequent war crimes tribunals was the concept of command responsibility. This legal doctrine holds that military and civilian leaders can be held accountable for war crimes committed by their subordinates if they knew, or should have known, about the crimes and failed to prevent or punish them. Under this standard, Rommel could theoretically have been investigated for the actions of the units under his command, particularly during the defense of the Atlantic Wall in France, where German forces were involved in suppressing the French resistance and implementing harsh occupation policies. Though there is no direct evidence that Rommel ordered or approved war crimes, any widespread abuses committed by forces under his command would have placed him under scrutiny in a post-war tribunal. Command responsibility does not require direct involvement in criminal acts. Rather, it requires only that a commander exercised effective control over subordinates and failed to act appropriately when crimes occurred. In Rommel's case, his control over Army Group B in France would have made him a likely candidate for questioning, though not necessarily indictment. Rommel's tenure in North Africa is often cited as an example of a clean war, a phrase that has come under increasing scrutiny by modern historians. In the desert campaigns, Rommel was known for treating prisoners of war with respect and for discouraging acts of brutality among his troops. He refused to carry out the Kommandobefehl, a directive from Hitler ordering the execution of captured Allied commandos, and took steps to ensure the humane treatment of enemy combatants. Rommel's conduct in North Africa was so widely admired that Allied commanders reportedly instructed their troops to fight him without animosity. British soldiers referred to him with a kind of reluctant respect, and propaganda often highlighted him as an honorable foe, to contrast him with more ideologically driven Nazi leaders. However, the narrative of the North African campaign as a clean war has been challenged. While Rommel himself may have upheld certain standards, the same cannot be said universally of all Axis forces in the theater, including Italian units or other German formations. That said, there is no concrete evidence that Rommel directly ordered or condoned war crimes in this region. In late 1943, Rommel was transferred to France to oversee the defenses of the Atlantic Wall in anticipation of an Allied invasion. As commander of Army Group B, he was responsible for fortifying coastal defenses, overseeing the Wehrmacht's operations in occupied France, and preparing for a confrontation that eventually came on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Rommel's presence in France placed him closer to the more morally ambiguous aspects of German military operations. The occupation of France involved extensive repression, anti-partisan operations, and reprisals against civilians, activities that often involved SS and Gestapo units, but also implicated elements of the regular army. While Rommel attempted to maintain military discipline and reportedly objected to SS involvement in civilian reprisals, he could not fully insulate his command from the broader policies of the Nazi regime. For instance, members of the French resistance were often executed without trial, and civilians were killed in reprisal for attacks on German troops. Whether Rommel approved, tolerated, or actively resisted these actions remains a subject of historical debate. Again, under command responsibility, Rommel might have faced questions about the conduct of these operations. However, without concrete evidence tying him to specific orders or systematic abuses, the likelihood of a formal indictment would have remained low. One of the most significant developments in Rommel's later career was his gradual disillusionment with Hitler and the Nazi regime. By 1944, as Germany's military situation deteriorated, Rommel began to advocate for negotiating a peace settlement with the Western Allies. He grew increasingly critical of Hitler's strategic decisions and questioned the morality of the war effort. Rommel's name became associated with the July 20, 1944, conspiracy to assassinate Hitler, although his exact role remains unclear. Some conspirators viewed Rommel as a potential leader in a post-Hitler Germany, while others doubted his commitment to the plot. He was likely not involved in the actual assassination attempt but may have been aware of plans to remove Hitler from power. When the plot failed, Rommel's involvement was revealed to the Gestapo, and Hitler offered him a grim ultimatum: commit suicide and receive a state funeral, or face trial and risk reprisals against his family. Rommel chose the former and died on October 14, 1944. His death as a victim of Nazi purges bolstered his posthumous image as a heroic figure who stood up to tyranny. It also spared him from the scrutiny that other German generals faced in the aftermath of the war. In the years following World War II, West Germany and its Western allies sought to distance the newly formed Bundeswehr and German state from the crimes of the Nazi regime. This effort was aided by narratives that separated the criminal SS from the honorable Wehrmacht. Rommel, with his clean reputation and tragic end, became a centerpiece of this mythology. His widow, Lucy Rommel, along with surviving officers and post-war authors, promoted a vision of Rommel as a soldier who served with honor and eventually resisted tyranny. Books, films, and biographies presented him as an apolitical professional whose only failing was misplaced loyalty. This rehabilitative narrative helped Rommel become one of the few German officers to retain widespread admiration both within Germany and internationally. However, modern scholarship has increasingly challenged the notion of a clean Wehrmacht, highlighting complicity in war crimes, particularly on the Eastern Front. Though Rommel was not directly involved in these atrocities, the idea that he represented a purely noble, apolitical soldier has been re-evaluated. Even so, no new evidence has surfaced to implicate him in specific criminal acts. If Rommel had survived the war and been taken into Allied custody, several outcomes are possible. He might have been called as a witness. Rommel's military experience and knowledge of the Nazi regime would have made him a valuable witness at the Nuremberg trials. Like Albert Speer, he could have cooperated with the Allies and distanced himself from the worst elements of the regime. He could have faced investigation. As a high-ranking officer, Rommel likely would have been investigated for possible war crimes or dereliction of duty regarding the actions of his subordinates. However, unless compelling evidence emerged, these investigations may not have resulted in charges. He could have been acquitted or never charged. Given his reputation, lack of ideological commitment to Nazism, and opposition to Hitler, Rommel might have avoided charges entirely. His case would likely resemble those of other Wehrmacht generals who were cleared of wrongdoing or received light sentences. He could have played a role in rebuilding Germany. Like many former officers, Rommel may have been recruited into efforts to help rebuild the West German military or serve as an advisor to Allied occupation authorities. His legacy as a professional soldier and critic of Hitler would have made him a useful figure in post-war reconciliation efforts. The question of whether Erwin Rommel would have been charged with war crimes is not easily answered, as it involves legal, moral, and political considerations. While Rommel was certainly a senior military commander in Hitler's Germany, his conduct on the battlefield, respect for the laws of war, and ultimate opposition to the regime place him in a very different category from figures like Himmler, Göring, or Keitel. Rommel's lack of direct involvement in genocidal policies, his humane treatment of prisoners, and his efforts to maintain military honor make it unlikely that he would have faced serious charges. At most, he might have been subject to investigation under the principle of command responsibility, especially regarding events in occupied France. But without concrete evidence of complicity in specific crimes, prosecution would have been improbable. In the end, Rommel's forced suicide, tragic and politically motivated, may have spared him the ambiguities of post-war justice. His legacy, shaped by both fact and myth, continues to provoke debate. While not above criticism, Erwin Rommel remains one of the few German commanders of World War II whose name is more often associated with honor than with infamy.